Back to the usual and boring life. Prisoner of an Italian with a golden armor that forces me to listen while he rants about 40k lore.
It is not my fault you let Servo Pio steal your position as president. He threw you back in the basement himself. Also, what happened to Pio Perius? He disappeared from the basement, and I have not seen him again.
Oh, he just went and decided to invade Thailand. I'm sure he will call. At some point. In the very distant future.
Well, while he's away, it is time for another great and investigative deep dive in 40k lore. Are you ready for it, Pio?
Yeah.
There once was a man born in a forgotten time, created by a force of unknown origin. He will cross the ages knowing his one purpose, to lead humanity as the greatest empire in the galaxy, the Imperium of Men. In this time, he will be known with only one name, the Emperor of Mankind.
So, what will we talk about in this new video? I will like a video on the orcs for a change.
Maybe in the future. Today we are here to talk about the Emperor of Mankind. Specifically his true origins. No myths, no legends, no suppositions. The truth about the creation of the Emperor and humanity.
I wonder where you find the time and mental fortitude to research this kind of 40k lore.
It's a superpower called autism, Pio. Maybe you will learn it one day. But before we start, as usual, we would like to thank our Discord members and our Patreon members for the support they give us. And specifically in this case, two members, Shock and Bulfrir Gauld. They both helped us research this video and work on the lore we will expose today. In fact, Shock joined our Patreon specifically to pitch us this video and help us making it. Making a good chunk of research by himself by the time we finally got to it.
So wait, he joined our Patreon, paid us, did part of the research himself, just to see this video made by us?
No, Pio. He joined our Patreon, paid us, and did a good chunk of the initial research himself so that we could make this video talking about it with an Italian accent.
Mamma mia, you are right.
And before we delve in this very complicated and abstract lore that we spent entire weeks theorizing about, I just wanted to warn you all that we have started a new weekly event on our Patreon called Lore Destroyers. Pretty much once a week we join a voice chat on Discord with Patreon members, we watch the lore videos that patrons submit for us to watch and judge, especially on a lore accuracy standpoint, and have a big laugh every time I end up having a meltdown for how inaccurate a video is.
Astral Claws had a point. They also needed to learn when to let the point go. The Imperium didn't really have a point, but the Imperium doesn't need a point to absolutely wreck.
The Imperium didn't really have a point? Sorry, what? Like...
I think he did, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, these are forces serving under us, and they have just decided completely fucking arbitrarily that they will stop paying taxes to the Imperium and the Carthago sector, and even while the matter is being discussed, yes, it is the fault of the Carthago sector, but they were technically attacking, like, Imperial fortresses around the territory of the Maelstrom Zone. I fear some of the content that could be sent, but hey, if you want to take part in it, just join the Patreon on the Pio Servo level or any level above it. Now, let's get to the video. But I want to give you a warning before we start. The amount of research that went into this video is massive and done by multiple people. The first part of the video will be very easy to follow. For the second part, I will have to guide you step by step to make things clear. So, just make sure to pay close attention. I imagine that everyone, at least generally, knows about the Emperor of Mankind. A giant clad in golden armor and with a flaming sword. And with such mighty psychic powers that he could be defined as a sentient walking apocalypse. The righteous ruler of humanity and the Imperium of Man, the Emperor of Mankind is an individual of such immense powers that nobody even comparable existed before him, or even after him. You know the general story of the Emperor, by this point I explained it in various videos. Appeared out of nowhere after the birth of Slanesh and started conquering Terra, unifying it, making treaties with Mars, creating superhuman soldiers and demigod beings in the Primarchs, and launching the Great Crusade to reconquer the stars. A master of war, sciences, technologies, and a fervent believer of the imperial truth. A staunch opposer of religions and gods. For reasons that will be understood only when chaos will move against him and the Imperium of Man. Currently, the Emperor of Mankind is a corpse on a throne, Wounded in his final battle with Horus Lupercal, he was interred by his own choice where it would be the most useful. The Golden Throne, an arcane machine made of unknown and Xenos technologies, modified to be a life support system to keep the Emperor alive, so that he can keep closed the portal to the human webway and avoid the destruction of Terra, and at the same time project the Astronomicon, the beacon that guides navigators through the warp, and that is the only reason humanity can use faster than light travel to move around the galaxy. Fed 1,000 psykers a day at the beginning of his interment, now he's fed an estimate of 4,000 psykers daily to keep him alive, keep the human webway sealed and the Astronomicon lit.
Also, keep in mind that the Emperor is decomposing on that throne from 10,000 years, so I'm pretty sure the throne room smells like Nargol's armpits.
Now, obviously seeing the kind of individual the Emperor was and what he was capable of doing, many people have started questioning his origins. Where was he born? When? Where has he been all this time? This is the first question we will answer today, the origins of the Emperor as a physical being. There is another question to answer that will arrive later though, so be prepared to a true deep dive into the lore. We actually know where and when the Emperor was born. In fact, we know about it from 1st edition. The Emperor was born in the year 8000 BC on Earth. To be specific, he was born in Central Anatolia, or how we will know it today, he was born in the territory of Turkey.
The Emperor is born. Of the birth and early life of the Emperor we shall say only a little, for space does not permit us to examine every detail of a lifetime spanning almost 50,000 years. His mother and father were human. His brothers and sisters were mortals like any other, so when he was born his parents had no reason to think of him as anything other than a normal human child. Only much later would he identify the time of his birth as the 8th millennium BC or the place as Central Anatolia, and by then he would have almost forgotten his early life among the barren mountains and cold streams.
Now, this information is contained in an old 1st edition codex named Realm of Chaos, The Lost and the Damned. But this manual, other than having some parts that are still canon and informations that will be very important for this video, also contains very outdated stuff that is obviously not true anymore by this point. In fact, the same codex talks about how the Emperor was born from the ritual sacrifice of thousands of psykers, that died en masse to fuse their souls together and be reborn as a single most powerful being as they sensed the warp was becoming more and more dangerous, and they knew they could not be reincarnated any longer, which is not part of canon lore anymore. But the part about him being born to a normal human family in a farming village in the ancient times is still very much canon. We can learn as much from the book Master of Mankind, where we are given a direct flashback to when the Emperor avenged the death of his own father at the hands of his own uncle.
Mud brick huts lined both sides of the river. The wheat fields to the east were a patchwork sea of dark gold beneath the eye of the setting sun. The village was never truly quiet, even after the day's work was done. Families talked and laughed and fought. Dogs barked for attention and whined for food. The wind set the scrabbling trees to singing with the hiss of leaves and the creak of branches forming their eternal song. A ragged dog growled as the boy passed, yet fled yelping when he gave it no more than a glance. A carrion bird, hunchbacked and evil of eye, cried out above the village. A pack of other ragged children moved aside when he drew near, their ball game fading away and their eyes lowering. His barefooted walk took him unerringly to the home of his father's brother. The man, darkened and hardened by his years in the fields, was sat outside the mud brick hut, threading beads onto a string for his youngest daughter. The boy's uncle uttered the sound that meant the boy's name. In response to this greeting, the boy held up his father's skull. Many centuries after these events, citizens of even civilized and advanced cultures would often misunderstand exactly what a myocardial infarction was. The savage, constricting pain in the chest was due to blood no longer flowing cleanly through the heart's passages, causing harm to the myocardium tissue of the heart itself. Put simply, the core of a human being runs dry, trying to function with no oxygenated lubricant. This happened to the boy's uncle when he set eyes upon the skull of his murdered brother. The boy who would be king watched with neither remorse nor any particular hostility. He looked on as his uncle slid from his crouch onto the mud, clutching at his treacherous chest. He watched as his uncle's sun-darkened features pinched closed, ugly and tight in supreme agony as the older man shook with the onset of convulsions. He saw the necklace slip from his uncle's grip, the necklace that was being made for his young cousin and will now never be finished. Others came running. They shouted. They cried. They made the noises of language that spoke of panic and sorrow in a Proto-Indo-European tongue that will come to be known as an early precursor to the Hittite dialect. The boy walked away, heading back towards his family's hut. On the way, he turned to the figure, the giant, clad in gold who walked nearby. Nordic war clan tattoos curled on the towering warrior's face, curling from his temples to follow the curves of his cheekbones. The serpentine ink curves, white against his dark flesh, ended upon his chin just beneath his mouth.
But the part about other psykers fusing into one single being has now been fully retconned from canon. In fact, it has been retconned with an even more interesting line of events. The Emperor wasn't the result of psykers fusing, he was in fact the first ever psyker of the human race. We can learn of this not only from the Codex of Horus Heresy Age of Darkness 2nd edition, but also from the Horus Heresy book of Mortis.
The Psyker Paradox. Psykers are sentient beings who can harness or manipulate the warp. The Emperor is the first and greatest of all human psykers, but there are psychically able people in every human culture and on every world throughout the galaxy, and to every generation yet, more psykers are born. John Grammaticus walked into the middle of the tableau. All stood in the place where he had been when he had lived the dream in reality. 2 steps behind the man with the crown and the burning sword. All shifted and heard the fish scales of his pearl-white armor chime as he moved. He watched John circle the man in the crown. "You and the big him," said John. "Did he call himself an emperor back then?" All shook his head. "What a crown, though," said John, nodding at the image of the man. "To service a higher ideal demands that those who can act sacrifice themselves to authority," said All. "Those are his words, right? That's what he said about why he took power. He had that ambition even then. Is there anyone then who could go up against him?" All shrugged. "There were some, but he was the first." "You mean the first psyker?" "The first witch, the first wizard, sorcerer, shaman, druid. The first. There were others who were different, but none like him. Not in the beginning." "What changed?" "He did. He was weaker than he is now. Much weaker. But always stronger than anyone else. People change. People stay the same. He was always driven. Always."
So, the Emperor was born in the year 8000 BC, from normal human parents and in the territory of modern-day Turkey. First and most powerful of the human psykers, and an immortal perpetual, the Emperor, after murdering his own uncle...
Good. I never liked Uncle Ragnar anyway.
Left what he knew and his old family home to embark in a travel around the globe to learn about humanity and expand his knowledge and powers how he could. He was a force that tried to spread seeds of wisdom and peace. He watched from the sidelines as the human race developed, sometimes taking on the mantle of a great leader or advisor throughout history to guide humanity in the right direction. But at times of crisis he was always there, steering the human race along a narrow survival path that he alone was able of seeing. But one thing about the Emperor was clear. Along the way he learned of chaos. Being the most powerful human psyker, he knew of the monstrosities living in the warp. And he had one single mission on which he was focused: eradicating chaos and the entities that were born from it. But on the opposite side, as he was aware of the warp and the chaos gods were aware of him.
The Chaos Powers sensed the presence of the new man and his efforts to curb their own power and growth. Even before they became fully conscious, the Chaos Powers recognized the Emperor as their greatest enemy. Khorne was the first of the great powers to wake fully, and an era of wars and conflict raged across the globe. Tzeentch was the next, and nation and politics grew to adulthood with all of their implicit intrigues and double dealings. Nurgle was the third to awake, and plagues swept across continents, claiming many souls for the Lord of Decay. By the end of the Middle Ages, all 3 of these chaos powers had awoken to full consciousness. The 4th power, Slaanesh, still slumbered.
As the Emperor lived through history, he started seeing the flow of chaos in more and more things and living beings. And when humanity fell into disarray in the Age of Strife, after the cybernetic revolt had stripped humans of their most advanced technologies and weapons, and the aliens that at once were allies of humanity turned on them, and started devastating what was left of the once great human federation of the Dark Age of technology, the Emperor took direct hand in the future of humanity, taking upon himself the name and title of Emperor of Mankind. A title that Malcador the Sigillite actually pushed him to adopt. He would arise as the greatest warlord on Terra. He would unearth the Golden Throne, a device the Emperor had found buried on the planet, and would start the events we are all aware of until now. Always single-minded, and always with a clear vision in his mind, the survival of humanity, as we can learn from the Book of the Last Church.
Did you not just speak to me of the horror of the Crusades, and what evil men do in the name of purity? You are no better than the holy men you were telling me about.
The difference is that I know I am right, Uriah.
Spoken like a true autocrat.
You misunderstand, Uriah. I have seen the narrow path that humanity must walk to survive. This is how we must begin.
And now we know the answer to the question about the Emperor's true origins. But this raises another and a lot more important question. And with an answer so complicated and hidden that it spans almost 8 editions of Warhammer 40k lore. Why does he exist? And from here, I fell into a rabbit hole of which I have yet to see the end. While there might be a lot of speculation on the true origins of the Emperor of Mankind on many other YouTube channels, I believe we have found ultimate proof not only of his origins, but of the origins of the human race itself. But be prepared, the answer is far from simple, and it will change how you see the Emperor forever once we are done explaining it.
I can already feel the pure energy flowing through Danny.
Our story starts in the most unorthodox of places. It starts in the Book of Xenology, released in 2006. This book has a very simple cast. We have Inquisitor Rayleigh, a radical of the Ordo Xenos now confirmed dead at the beginning of the book. The main character, Inquisitor Bram Sasham, a Puritan of the Conclave Conservati of the Ordo Xenos, and a Magos biologist called Darvus. The story by itself is simple. Inquisitor Sasham is contacted by the Ordo Xenos faction of the Conservati with news of the death of Inquisitor Rayleigh, and is ordered to rush on the planet of Biegel 9th, as mentions were found in the files of Rayleigh of an hidden lab on the planet, where the Conclave might find proof of the heresies of the Radical Inquisitor and expose him for the heretic he was even now that he's dead.
Since intercepting this welcome report, we in the Conclave have suppressed all news of the heretic's demise. Alas, it will not take long for Raleigh's friends, powerful friends, to discover his death and attend to his legacy. We must act quickly to expose any trace of his foul deeds, thus casting disgrace upon his peers and strengthening our own brotherhood's standing within the Ordo. Amongst Raleigh's files, there exists reference to a research facility on Beagle 9. Evidently, he assumed governance of this world and established for himself a private enterprise. There is no place better to seek evidence of his crimes. You have 10 days, Sasham. We dare not conceal Raleigh's death any longer. Get to Beagle 9, decommission this facility and record everything. The purity of the Ordo Xenos demands it. A serpent has grown strong in the company of lions, and it falls to you to smother its wickedness.
Now, this book is weird in structure. It is a mixture between a narrative, a codex, and a science book. Not to say that it is bad, because it's not. But it is certainly unorthodox when it comes to usual 40k content. We will go generally through the story of the book, but not too much in detail, as the main part that interests us is the scientific findings that will happen on Biegel 9. When Inquisitor Sasham arrived on the world, he found a structure that indeed was a secret lab built by Inquisitor Rayleigh. And it wasn't abandoned either. Inside it, other than servitors and machines, a single human was overseeing the entire lab. A certain Magos biologist Darvus. To the horror of Inquisitor Sasham, the laboratory was a Xenos research facility, with alien prisoners kept in cells and studied by both Rayleigh when he was alive and on the planet, and by Darvus when he wasn't. The Inquisitor will deliver an ultimatum to Darvus. In 10 days, he will burn the place down and demolish it with everything that was inside. But after various pleadings and a gamble by Darvus, the Magos biologist was allowed to end the Xenos in the lab one by one and perform dissections, as a final rushed examination of the Xenos for any new information the Imperium might learn. Darvus was not all there with his head. Other than Inquisitor Rayleigh, the only friend he had for the last 15 years was the Krut prisoner of the laboratory. A Krut named Gakar that helped Darvus in his endeavors around the lab.
Krut girlfriend?
No, it's a male Krut.
I'm still shipping it.
There is a reason you live in a basement, Pio. Now, as the story goes on, Inquisitor Sasham delves deeper into the library of the lab left by Rayleigh, while Darvus performs his executions and vivisections on the subjects he has in the lab. Pretty much one from every major Xenos race of 40k, and some even from minor ones. One of them I even suspect of being the orb that the Marines end up fighting in the Astartes fan-made series, the race known as the Umbra. But as the dissections go on, Darvus starts noticing something a little intriguing. After dissecting the Tau ethereal female, and little parenthesis, this dissection confirms that they indeed do have pheromones in their bodies that could be used to influence other members of their race. Darvus will note on the general observations,
Subject's anatomy suggests a highly developed species of analogous physical durability to mankind. Physical structure, general organic processes, and reproductive anatomy all show remarkable similarities. Is this racial parallelism purely coincidental?
The same thing would happen after the dissection of the Eldar exodite kept in the lab.
Subject's external and structural anatomy is shockingly human analogous. As anticipated, internal elements reflect extraterrestrial origin. Overall complexity precludes classification and identification of elements. All organs display an unsurpassed aesthetic order and configuration, suggesting a level of development far exceeding our own. All findings are ultimately speculative. Subject represents a being of such highly evolved composition it is doubtful we could even comprehend the function of certain structures, even given time to study them. NB. Why should a creature of such obvious superiority and distinction reflect our structural patterns so closely? See also Tau, Hrud, Orc.
And, at least partially, the same thing and similarities at least to human ancestors will be noticed even in the species of the Orcs.
Subject's biology displays quality redolent of both animal and fungal physiotypes. Fungal portion suggests a highly durable network of fungal microorganisms negating complex internal organs, immunosystems, and reproductive anatomy. Animal biology suggests primate analog, i.e. primitive pack-based omnivore. Twin systems argue perfectly but lack evidence of evolutionary process, i.e. vestigial structures. Conclusion. I would suggest that the subject is the result of highly advanced biological engineering, representing the perfect symbiosis of simple, durable, aggressive organic systems.
Now, to go back to the story of the book a bit, Sasham will continue with the reports of his findings to the Ordo Xenos, especially for the weaknesses Darvus was spotting and reporting as potentially exploitable by the Imperium of Men, to end the lives of specific Xenos races. And he slowly started moving from a completely Puritan Inquisitor to a more radical position. Where Puritans wanted to burn the aliens on sight, Sasham was starting to understand them, study them. Not for pleasure, but to know how to hate them and kill them better. But strange things started happening on the planet. First thing, Darvus would often stare numbly and speak with an empty cell in the lab, specifically Cell 1. A cell that, observed by Sasham, showed no alien inside. And yet Darvus insisted there was one, without any kind of doubt. Other strange things that happened were defenses engaging at random, the central matrix of the facility going rogue, even the psyker of the retinue of Sasham being found dead, and the responsibility of her demise given to the Krut assistant of Darvus, with the equivalent of a manhunt starting in the labs to find him. To be honest, the woman had a bite mark on her body, but as we learn later, it wasn't he that killed her. Specimens would start escaping containment, various tyrannids, and especially a lictor that got out of his cell and attacked the human population revolting outside the lab. Nobody having noticed this escape, as his cell seemed to almost open randomly. It was then that another inquisitorial transport ship appeared on the orbit of the world. Sasham theorized they were Rayleigh's allies that had come for the lab, but he wasn't sure. He tried contacting them, but there was no response. He tried contacting his own ship, and it seemed to have simply disappeared from orbit. Inquisitorial forces will start coming down. Bombardment targeting escapes from the lab, and even Sasham's own personal transport will strand him and Darvus inside the lab. Darvus was slowly going more and more insane. All of the people in the retinue of Sasham were dead, and he was slowly sinking more and more in the library of Rayleigh. Darvus was still slaughtering and dissecting his own alien friends. At least he considered them friends, and that was slowly causing him to go mad. It is at this point that Sashan will locate the first and biggest piece of the puzzle to answer the question of the true origins of the Emperor, and the reasons the Emperor of mankind and humanity at large exist. And the first part of that answer comes from this tablet. Let's delve into it, shall we?
Rev to attached sketch. I found the stone tablet on the surface of Torakai 4, an Eldar exodite community, a day before its destruction at the hands of the Tarantula Space Marines conducting an exterminatus campaign. This drawing is the only record of its existence, and with the aid of xenolinguitors, I have since deciphered its pictographic tale. The story is followed from the bottom upwards and is told in 4 distinct tiers. The top of the tablet and a possible 5th tier was missing at the time of my study. The account can be related as follows. Lowest tier. A series of enigmatic figures, each with its own runic and pictorial identity, gods or entities gathered together. Iconic flames or winds linked them to the 2nd tier, suggesting an element of narrative causality. The first begets the second. Thus, the figures depicted at the foot of the tablet could be speculated to be creating those of the 2nd tier. 2nd tier. A host of iconized creatures seemingly being created by the shadowy figures below. Note certain recognizable features as well as a myriad of unknown others. 3rd tier. A violent conflict, seemingly between the ancient creators of the 1st tier and a mysterious enemy, represented here by a featureless face and a complex runic description. We must assume, given their positioning between opposing forces, that the races of Tier 2 are a fundamental part of this war. At either edge of the tablet, the shadowy figures are seen fleeing from the spatial borders of the monolith, defeated by the skull-faced enemy. 4th tier, partially missing. My calculus log I presented a dozen alternative meanings for this section, but suggested it is most likely that the 2 boxed panels, connected as they are by those same firewind strands to Tier 1, represent members of the shadowy creators who survived the war. The boxes will seem to suggest they are instead imprisoned, either by their enemies or within the physical forms they have adopted. The first is characterized by a split mask, laughing and crying at the same instant upon a webbed background. The second appears to show a clawed, bloody hand, but has been defaced or deliberately fractured by a violent rending of the stone. There is also evidence of a 3rd box panel, lost along with the final tier. I have since scoured the records of the Librium Xenos and the Archivati of Terra for information upon the missing fragment, but have discovered nothing.
Now, let's give it a bit of context, even if keep in mind the date in which this tablet was recorded and catalogued in the libraries of Rayleigh. 785 and 41. The 1st tier are obviously the old ones, the creators of life in the galaxy. We can infer this because the 2nd tier, which is the races they created, bears a lot of Xenos, but one in particular is pretty recognizable. And by sight above all others, it is the favorite creation of the old ones. Those are the Eldars. The 3rd tier is obviously the Necrons. That is a Necron head, and the old one figure seen fleeing is fleeing from a pylon. That is a Blackstone pylon, the ultimate psychic blocker in the 40k universe. The 4th tier are the Eldar gods, that are in fact inferred to not be creations of the old ones. But this, together with other sources, documents that they are old ones that adopted a different form. They became the gods of the Eldars and hid at the end of the war with the Necrons and the Catans. Of the 2 boxes we see, one is completely scratched out, but by description it shows a clawed and bloody hand, the symbol of the elder god of Cain. His hand left tainted with blood after his murder of Eldanesh, the first and greatest of the Eldari. But the first box is a lot more comprehensible. The multicolored mask is none other than Chegorach. And the web you see behind him is nothing else than the Webway, the realm he now resides in, as he and the Harlequin's faction are the guardians of the Black Library of the Webway. But as the comment of Rayleigh adds, there seems to be a 5th tier, a tier that is currently missing. But 18 years later, Rayleigh will be able to locate the 5th tier.
I have the missing fragment, sketched in secret from the library of the Conclave Conservat itself. What hypocrisy is this? They snarl and scoff at the idea of Xenology, yet hoard its greatest treasures for themselves. My calculus log tells me the scope of possibility defies a simple definition to this 5th tier, but I feel sure I can decipher the pictograms myself. I have spent my life learning of the Xenos infesting our Imperium. Their legends are codebooks to the histories of the galaxy, and here is the final piece to the puzzle. No wonder the Conclave have resisted its exposure. They'll kill me if they discover I have it.
And here, things get complicated. So, time to pay attention, because the 5th tier is none other than a human child. The 5th tier of the Stone Tablet, describing the origins of the Eldars and general life in the galaxy, has as its final tier a human child. This obviously unleashed a myriad of theories, but I subscribe to two in particular. This is either the human race at large, being created by the last remaining old ones before they were slaughtered by the Catans and the Necrons, or that by itself is not only humanity, but the soul of the Star Child, as you will know it, the Emperor of Mankind. Things from here will move fast. Darvus went completely insane, using a scalpel to wound himself while repeating that the metal lives. All of this will reach an end when the matrix of the lab will completely get corrupted. And it is then that Darvus opened Cell 1, the empty one, and out of it came a Necron, fully active and aware. By now the forces of the Inquisition were at the doors and bombing the lab. It is then that something happened. It seems Rayleigh appeared in the lab and attacked Sasham. When Sasham awoke, he had been administered a muscle relaxant and was tied to a table. The cogitator recording their conversation went in error when trying to record the identity of the person speaking to him, simply recording him as unknown one. Necron runes littered the entire page of the conversation. And here, the final revelation happens. At least in years 790 and 41, keep in mind that the events we are talking about take place in 805 and 41, Inquisitor Rayleigh was found and killed by a Necron that stole his identity and features to infiltrate the Ordo Xenos. He had falsified Sasham orders to bring him here and forced Darvus to dissect and analyze the aliens that were now infesting the galaxy, to learn more about them, but specifically, to learn about humanity at large. Let me read you some passages. It was Darvus who forced my hand. For 15 years I've kept him, my little pet. His mind was so distorted I could feed him what lies I chose. He thought he served his Imperium. He thought he toiled for the good of mankind. The poor fool. For 15 years he standed and observed whatever alien filth we brought him. We didn't foresee his attachment. It became necessary to introduce a new element, something to hasten his dissections. And now we have awoken to find our heritage soiled, sullied by the mongrel progeny of our most ancient foes. Our master has a mind to know his enemies. Little men and Darvus. This brilliant broken mind. He was our instrument of study. So we waited. We filled the cells of the bestiary. We gathered what knowledge we could. Then, when our lord's whim dictated, we brought you here. We slaughtered your war talker. We spread rumor and discontent. We pricked and harried you. We played you. Tell me, as you trolled through the records we created, as you struggled to divine weaknesses in those creatures whose existence held you so entranced, did you not stop to think what records might relate to your own kind? What is your own weakness? The answer is knowledge. Even trapped in your cage of prejudice, how quickly the text seduced you. How quickly all else faded. It is a weakness our master can use. It is a weakness you shall regret revealing. Dear Sasham, it's taken me a century to insinuate my way into your Inquisition. There are few of my kind capable. Most are mindless, pure, undistracted by personality. But there are those of us who remember, lords and ladies of another age, converted and purified, but not cleansed of memory. I remember the frailty of emotion, the weakness of the flesh, the imperfection of mortality. Hiding amongst your kind was no challenge at all. In my bearing, in my diaries, in my notes, I have been Inquisitor Rayleigh. Am I not a convincing counterfeit? Little man, the master has it in mind to observe one more dissection. Our poor friend Darvus has grown weary of slaughter. Perhaps it would be a kindness to leave you alive, yes? So he can enjoy his work? It is implied that Darvus vivisected Inquisitor Sasham in front of the false Inquisitor Rayleigh, and killed him in the process. And before you comment that then everything we read is false, No. Keep in mind, he says so himself that he has been Inquisitor Rayleigh. He was a counterfeit, meaning that there is an original, and taking the identity of somebody already inside the Inquisition is easier than a Necron being accepted in the ranks of the Inquisition completely at random. Now, from his own comment, the False Inquisitor has conducted this experiment with Darvus for at least 15 years. This actually clashes with the date in which the 5th tier of the tablet was found, which is 803 M41, and that is just a few years prior to the current events, meaning that it was the False Inquisitor that put it there. But trust me on this, the 5th tier is not made up, he is not lying. Remember, he commented himself, already revealed a Necron, that now we have awoken to find our heritage soiled, sullied by the mongrel progeny of our most ancient foes. He's clearly speaking of the old ones. He is not speaking of Xenos alone, but in general. He is including humanity in this categorization. And not only. Let me repeat one of the passages. Tell me, as you trolled through the records we created, as you struggled to divine weaknesses in those creatures whose existence held you so entranced, did you not stop to think what records might relate to your own kind? He obviously is hinting at that damn tablet. This is relating to humans, because the 5th tier is indeed correct. But there is the elephant in the room to discuss. The fact that this Necron mentions that he is a servant of the master known as the Deceiver. Now, this is 4th edition. By this point the Necrons were servants of the Catans, not enemies. They hadn't shattered their gods yet. But the fact that sects of the Necrons exist that still serve the Catans is still a thing present into canon. There is a Necron Catan cult in Sword of Calth, another one in Nightbringer. And even after the Book of Nightbringer was retconned, the Necron cult still was working for the Shard of the Nightbringer. There is also various appearances of this phenomenon in the Ciaphas Cain series. The point is that this is still canon. A Catan cult still worshipped a Shard of the Nightbringer on Pavonis, that then appeared later in another book. And another Catan cult stole the Shadow Light from Ciaphas Cain during the 13th Black Crusade. So Necrons working for Catan shards is not out of canon, on the contrary. Thank God it is somebody working for the Deceiver and not the Deceiver himself, as the Deceiver is the equivalent of a perpetual possible retcon made into a sentient being.
Why wouldn't you trust this if it came from the Deceiver?
What do you mean? He's called the Deceiver. It would be like trusting something told to you by a human called the Liar Make Fakerton.
Both of them seem very worthy of trust.
And that is why Pio Servo is actually superior to you, Pio.
You take that back immediately.
Point being that the Necron had no reason to lie. He knew that he wouldn't let Darvus or Sasham escape alive. It was his private library. Why feed him lies when the truth was a lot more compelling to learn that the weakness of humanity is indeed knowledge? But if we took only this as proof of our theory, we wouldn't have done a good job at investigating. So now we will move to the second source that proves that humanity and the Emperor are old ones related. And that is a book...
Yes, Bolivar, I want to buy a long glass fitted with
fuck?
an anti-gravitical stabilizing scope. Danny, can you keep it down a bit? I'm trying to buy weapons.
Pio, we are in the middle of a video
No,
here.
no, I can't speak. Yes, that servo-armed bastard will see which one of us is superior when a last bolt goes directly through his arm.
As I was saying, the next piece of the puzzle is contained in a book called Belisarius Cawl, The Great Work. Indeed a very recent 40k book by all standards. But before delving into it, let me explain a few things. I don't like new lore. If I didn't have to study it for videos, I wouldn't read anything past the Fall of Cadia. Especially if it has fucking Belisarius Cawl in the middle. I love good characters. I can make fun of very bad characters. But Belisarius Cawl is literally a plot device on spider legs. I can't stand him with all my being, so I hope you understand how much of an headache reading a book with him as a co-protagonist was. But what don't we do for lore research? And the second and last thing I want to add is that I hate the depiction given of Chapter Master Trashan in the first 6 chapters of this book. I don't know what got into Guy Haley, he's usually a master in writing good characters. He wrote my favorite 40k book ever, which is Dante, but Chapter Master Trashan, the last firstborn Chapter Master of the Scythes of the Emperor, in the first 6 chapters of this book is written like a depressed emo teenager. Again, if I wasn't researching for this video, I would have put down the book the second time he called himself and the firstborn brothers useless, and the Primaris the future and superior. There is good ways to write a depressed but proud character. The worst ones were used for Chapter Master Trashan. Thank God the stroke Guy Haley was having ended after the first 6 chapters, and the character redeemed himself into one of the best of the book. Now, I will just generally give the story of the book, but just for context, as it is very tangentially related to the subject at hand. The book sees Belisarius Cawl, the last firstborn members of the Scythes of the Emperor, and Tetrax Felix and his retinue of bodyguards returning to Sota, the now scarred home planet of the Scythes of the Emperor, destroyed by an Hive fleet some centuries before in a battle in which Thracian, their firstborn chapter master, took part. The planet has been scarred of all life on it. No oceans, no atmosphere. It is pretty much an empty rock drifting in space. But Belisarius Cawl wanted to investigate it, as he suspects that the planet is home to an ancient Necron structure that works as a communication relay. Now, to put it simply, Sota, the planet destroyed by the Tyranids, was home to the prison of a Catan shard built by the Necrons to power a Pharos. In fact, Blackstone was common under the mountains over which the fortress monastery of the Scythes was built. After a lot of battles with remnants of the Tyranids left behind to guard the planet, a lot of dead marines, and even tangential battles with the Scarab Necrons that emerged from the mountains, Felix, Alpha Primus and Belisarius Cawl managed to infiltrate the structure of the Catan relay. After a lot of fuckery involving time, space, gravity and such, they reached the sarcophagi where the original Catans imprisoned on Sota were kept. 8 of them in fact. 7 of them now dead, as we learn later, devoured by the 8 to survive. Belisarius Cawl would interface with the being, and then these exchanges would happen, and from here I will guide you through my mental process for all the connections that were made.
Again Cawl screamed. The pain was a phantom but felt all too real. Every one of his augmentations was carefully ripped away and pulled out for display. The Pharos sought to model him and turn back his existence through time to see what he had been before. It was all illusory, but it still hurt.
Nerve impulse. Organic, bioelectrical, overlaid mechanical and electronic enhancements, but evolved from...
The thing paused.
You are one of their things, ultimately.
Another pause.
You do not know this. You are ignorant of your genesis, a debased thing of a debased age.
One of their things? Is he referring to what I think he is? Is he confirming what the tablet said?
These are the gods of your time. God of machines, gods of chaos, gods of... men?
It paused, evaluating the word.
There is weakness in this era. You are a man. You are weak. Your species is weak. Far removed from the original plan of our enemy. These are not gods you worship. This machine god, these entities in the warp, this emperor, we will explain. The first is a lie. The second are emergent consciousnesses caused by etheric disturbance. The third is a weapon.
It paused at this.
There is war. The rift. A rift has opened. The purity of reality is polluted. The war continues. Our war. You fight it, but you are weak. You are echoes of might, bloodsome purity. Glory has left this galaxy.
The god of machines is a lie? Yes, it checks out. The machine god is nothing more than the Catan shard of the Void Dragon residing in the Noctis Labyrinth. So it is a lie. And the Chaos gods are indeed emergent consciousness caused by etheric disturbance. But the Emperor? A weapon? Could it be? Who is this Catan shard?
For eons we have been imprisoned within this mountain. For eons we have plotted our revenge. 8 fragments of 8 gods were given over to slavery here. We consumed the others to survive. The Necrontyr are fools. They are arrogant. They kept too large a piece of us alive to power this nodal point of theirs. They will regret it. For we remember what we were, and what we will one day be again. We are the ultimate manifestation of order. No logic or illogic can bind me. We are Zarulash, the potentate. We are Ctan of the stars and the tides of time and light. We are the manifestation of this universe's form and being. We are a god, and you will serve me. Set me free.
This Catan is not lying. If it is the biggest of the shards, and by definition the most powerful, it is truly the closest thing to a god of the material realm. He has no reason to lie to Cawl. He is an insect compared to it. He can destroy him with a single thought. And he's not the deceiver. The deceiver gets his way by manipulation. This Catan gets his way by sheer might and power. The Emperor is a weapon. A weapon for what? And from here, the entire lore was blown fully open for me, and I made the final connection that brought us to an answer. Now we know the human race, at least, if not the Emperor himself, were created by the Old Ones, their last creation before being defeated. But why? If they were created, there must be a reason. The question persists. Why? The Emperor is a weapon, and is described as one. But again, why? The Emperor is a psyker. The human race is a psychic race. It was the first, the most powerful. And yet, the warp. The answer is the warp. Follow me now. Things get complicated pretty fast. The Old Ones created humanity, and probably the Emperor himself, and it all relates to the warp. Can you imagine why? It is simple. The warp itself, the Imperium, wasn't always the equivalent of 40k hell like it is known today. In fact, various publications made for 40k hint at the fact that at one point the warp was a more peaceful realm. Not completely peaceful, mind you, it's the warp after all, but a lot less dangerous, like it is described in both codexes of the Eldar for 4th and 6th edition, and they pretty much say both the same thing.
On hundreds of idyllic planets seeded across the stars, the Eldar pursued their inclination as they willed, indulging every dream and investigating every curiosity. They mastered the labyrinth dimension of the webway, expanding their realms into the furthest corners of reality and learned much about the universe that has since been forgotten. When their spirits eventually left their mortal bodies, they dissolved peacefully back into the ether to be reborn again, for the warp did not thirst for elder souls then as it does today.
And it isn't the only publication mentioning this. In fact, the most recent mention of the primordial state of the warp in the past is in the final book of the Trilogy of Blood, called Darkness in the Blood.
And then a sea change. The warp altered, though subtly at first. Rasselus had little experience as a navigator of ships. Had he been born to the role, he might have noticed sooner. Like ancient mariners tasted the shift from salt to sweet in the waters of Terra's lost oceans. But soon it became apparent to him that the tempest was coming. The shrieking idioforms and psychopomps struggled to take shape. Those that manifested were sucked back to nothing among the energies that birthed them. Colors bled away. Currents stilled. A black wall was growing ahead, as impenetrable as the densest log bank and infinitely more forbidding. The task force sped towards it. The armored angel glinted in front of the darkness and vanished within completely. Against all the laws that governed it, the Imperium lost its mutability. Blackness seeped from the rolling wall of shadow. The visions and images weakened and then stopped altogether. There was a brief passage through warp space of a primordial calmness, smooth and bright as a moonlit pond, and then the flotilla plunged into the darkness.
The warp was calmer in its original state. It became agitated and started forming demons and chaos gods once the war in Haven erupted and the galaxy became a battlefield. It started being corrupted by the emotions and actions undertaken in the midst of a war between creators and gods. Humans were created by the Old Ones at the end of the war they were losing. The Emperor too. But why? And why did it take millions of years before they emerged? The answer here is also simple. The Old Ones saw the changes in the warp that made it a malevolent entity that would over time consume all. They wanted to create a countermeasure, something not only to stop it, but to cleanse it once and for all. They couldn't create it now because their creation would inevitably become involved in the war in heaven. So they had to play the long game, engineer their evolution on the longest of timescales to make them emerge in the moment they would be the safest, so that their weapon could emerge and do their bidding of burning the warp clean. Think about it. The Chaos Gods eyed the Emperor as a threat long before the Imperium, long before the Dark Age of Technology, long before Molech. They knew he was different. They knew what he was. And do you want to know why they were scared? The energies the Emperor emits are not chaos-oriented, but to the opposite. They are anti-chaos-oriented. The Emperor of Mankind is the only living being in existence that can kill a demon in a definitive manner. His sword, now wielded by Gilliman, is still capable of it by the sheer fact that it absorbed a portion of his immense psychic powers. But how was he engineered? He wasn't always around. He came to be in 8000 BC. Wait, there is a solution to that too. His soul. The Old Ones weren't only masters of genetical engineering, but soul engineering. The legend of the Star Child, the golden presence in the warp. It was the soul of the Emperor, created at a time where the warp wasn't in shambles like it is now, lying in waiting for the perfect vessel to contain his power. That soul entered the baby that became the Emperor, and solidified him as the manifestation of the last weapon of the Old Ones, a final weapon against the encroaching darkness of chaos. Think about it, it lines up. And they didn't rely on the Emperor alone, but also on the psychic amplifier that is the Golden Throne. Many people think the Emperor built it, but no, the throne was already on Terra. The Emperor himself found it. It is confirmed in The End of the Death Part 1.
No, you misunderstand my point. I'm sorry I didn't make it clearly. I agree conquer is an aggressive militaristic term, a frighted word. Of course, the word he actually used was katakto, for he was speaking a proto-form of Eleniki there, on the banks of the Eye Faces. So we can allow for some interpretation. It was a long time ago. I was citing the story as an example of aspiration. Our aspiration defines us, I believe, more than anything. Beside the Eye Faces, my father wept because, at that time, he felt he had accomplished all he could. His ambitions were achieved, and the revelation shook him. He was not proud or satisfied. He was bereft. Of course, as it turned out, there were many more worlds to conquer. The work had scarcely begun. On the banks of the Eye Faces he had won, not for the first time, not for the last, the throne of the known world. Not long after that, he found another throne, a literal throne. That changed everything. Yes, found it. Well, that's what he told me.
The Golden Throne uses Xenos technology in many cases theorized to be Eldar in origin, but Eldar technology is nothing else than Old Ones technology adapted for the use from lesser species. The Eldar Webboy wasn't built by the Eldars, it was built by the Old Ones to travel around the galaxy as fast as possible without entering the warp directly. A safe corridor to pass through the tides of the Imperium. But where does this leave us humans? The Emperor is the most powerful of human souls, to the point that he's the only stable Alpha Plus level psyker ever recorded and the most powerful being our species has ever known. But why do we exist? Why isn't it only him? And the answer to this question came from one of the last books of the Siege of Terra, The End and the Death Part 2. Here we learn of the unspoken sanction protocol put in place from the Emperor for the Golden Throne.
According to the directives of the unspoken sanction, the instruction of which Vulcan knows he must live with for the remainder of his lives, the psycho-able candidates are still being brought in. Each one of them has been narcosedated and placed within an anti-gravitic casket. Mind-locked servitors guide the floating casket in silent rivers from the silver door and the throne room's other entrance ports. Coffins for the living. There are hundreds of them, and thousands more yet to be steered in. Gnolls of the Sisterhood await them at the wall gantries, taking each casket in turn and sliding it into its machined wall socket. Other sisters are clearing spent caskets so that sockets can be reprimed. The burnout rate is atrocious. There is a smell of ash in the air, a stink Vulcan can't get out of his throat. The psychic backwash of this monstrous immolation should be unbearable too, but it is virtually absent. Every shred and scrap of psychic power is being sucked into the conflagration and consumed.
But in the Book of Master of Mankind, we also learn something extremely important about the Golden Throne, and especially the unspoken sanction.
Kyria didn't even have to sign. A nod was enough to set the hundreds of servitors working, led by the scattering of sisters and their Martian allies. She stood in the heart of the Emperor's throne room and watched every one of the 999 other coffins raised into place along the arching walls. The process took several hours to complete, ending within the dark metal pods all staring inwardly towards the Golden Throne itself. She refused to dwell on the fact that for each active coffin locked inside its cradle, another 9 sockets remained empty.
9 sockets remained empty for each coffin containing a psyker connected to the Golden Throne? That means that 10,000 psykers can be connected to be absorbed and their energy is used by the Emperor and the Golden Throne. It is time to get the story straight and deliver the final answer to the biggest question that surrounds the Emperor and humanity. Why are we? Why does he exist? The Emperor and humanity are a creation of the Old Ones, a long-awaited plan put in motion with a failsafe, or in this case, a weapon at its center, the Emperor of mankind. The Emperor possesses the most powerful human soul ever created, made directly by the Old Ones. The tale of the Star Child wasn't a lie. Something was awaiting its appropriate vessel in the warp just to manifest. And it manifested in 8000 BC with the Emperor of Mankind, a very powerful warp entity given human form. The Emperor was and is the first and most powerful of the Psykers. So dangerous in fact the Chaos Gods knew it was a threat long before humans even invented anything to interact directly with the warp. Because his energies were the most pure and anti-chaos ever conceived, the only true entity that can give chaos in its entirety a true death, if he can become powerful enough to do so. The Old Ones left the soul of the Emperor slumbering, but sent and hid on Terra a device. We know it as the Golden Throne. A device capable of not only focusing and amplifying the power of the Emperor, but to use other Psykers as batteries to make the energies emitted even more powerful. And by definition, strengthen even the Emperor himself as a being. If the Emperor is a weapon, we are ammo. We were made to support and strengthen him so that he may reach his final goal. A final goal we don't know. The Emperor says he knows what it is, and sees it, even if he doesn't see a way to reach it. But it is my theory, and even the theory of Shock that first proposed this video, that the final objective of the Emperor of Mankind was cleansing the warp of all its malice, and bring it back into a primordial calm state, so that the survivors in the material realm wouldn't be destroyed by the malignity of a realm out of control. It explains why the Chaos Gods had to ally and move against him. He was conquering the galaxy, he was doing his own thing. If he wasn't a danger, why go on the trouble to stop him? And even forge an alliance between gods, when it is renowned that the gods hate everyone as much as they hate each others. The Emperor even refused the gifts of the Dark King when it tried to manifest through him. It is unknown why. Maybe the main reason is that it is inferred that the Dark King wouldn't be powerful enough to destroy all Chaos Gods, and rid the warp of taint once and for all. Or maybe the Emperor didn't want to replace a malignant entity with another one, like Collanius Pius told him.
"You're assuming the mantle of godhood," Ol says, "simply to destroy."
"To protect."
The charred custodian replies.
"To defend."
"No!" Ol snaps back. "To shortcut your way to another quick solution that disregards all later consequences. I've told you this before so many times, you've never listened."
But now this makes me wonder, what if this was the plan all along? What if the Golden Throne, that is being fed Psykers daily in the thousands by this point, is doing nothing else but strengthen the being of the Emperor so that he can achieve the strength he needs to complete his mission, destroying chaos once and for all? Even the creation of the human webway supports this. The Old Ones made the webway to not disturb the warp. My theory is that the webway itself was being repaired and reopened by the Emperor, so that once the warp was cleansed, it could be left alone and untouched by exterior living entities, so that it will not return into a chaotic state again. So, one final question arises, and on this, unfortunately, I have no answer to give. If the Emperor dies, and his soul becomes whole once again in the warp after 10,000 years of endless veneration of his being that empowered him, and the sacrifices of millions of Psykers that now added their energies to his, what kind of being will emerge? And will it be powerful enough to complete the final task, burning chaos away from the warp? Wow, we didn't make a video like this from the times of the Rangdang Xenocides video. I miss sparking about lore like this.
Yeah, I missed it too. Maybe. But I suspect that this theory of yours will cause problems.
Why?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it has everything to do with Inquisitor Eisenflor aiming a bolt pistol at your head. But that might be just a supposition.
Are you a Necron too?